The scorched moon hung low in the sky, half devoured by shadows and burning wreckage. All around him, the landscape was a jagged wound, twisted metal, smoldering tree stumps, and cracked marble structures once elegant, now clawed open by orbital fire. Ronan Vallon moved with the residual stiffness of a man who'd survived too many near deaths in too little time. His tactical display flickered with error codes and static. His plasma rifles sputtered a dying pulse with each step. This was the outer shell of the Terran Royal Garden, now a graveyard of crystal walkways and silk banners turned to ash. The wind carried the scent of ozone and scorched pollen. He stepped over a melted rail of crystalline filigree, the kind of thing that had once impressed the Terran diplomats. Now it stuck to his boot like glue. The orders were clear: sweep extract, leave no survivors who might be loyal to the cradle. But his gut told him to keep looking. Something wasn't right. A resonance, a hum at the edge of his perception, more felt than heard. He descended into the half-collapsed observatory where glass domes once shimmered with starlight. Now they bled shards onto the marble floor. A faint shimmer in the far corner caught his eye. Not movement breath. He approached with the caution of someone who'd opened too many doors with weapons behind them. There, among draped silk torn from the ceiling, a figure trembled. Emerald skin bloodied, but still luminous in the fractured light. The ceremonial robes hung off her frame in tatters, though the crests stitched along the hem still bore the Terran sigil. She was no ordinary citizen. She was the one the transmission had mentioned, Kaelyn Tharis, the last royal not confirmed, captured, or executed. High-value target. Untouched. Alive. And terrified. Her eyes snapped open when his boot scraped a shard. No scream. Just a sharp inhale and the tension of a cornered animal. She expected pain, death, humiliation. Ronan didn't raise his rifle. Instead, he knelt slowly, hand open, palm up. "You're safe," he whispered, though he knew it was a lie. She blinked suspicion like coiled wire in her expression. But she didn't flinch when he reached into his medkit and unlatched a field spray. The antiseptic hissed gently as he sprayed the torn skin on her collarbone. Her breath hitched. Not from pain, she was surprised. That it didn't burn. That he wasn't hurting her. Her people had always spoken of humans like viral agents corrupting invasive crude. She had braced for roughness, for the theft of dignity. But instead he was methodical, focused, and quiet. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped. Voice cracked and almost musical. "Your kind doesn't survive long near the spires." "Neither does yours," he muttered. "But you're not dead. That makes us both anomalies." She turned her face slightly, the moonlight catching on the bruises beneath her eyes. Her gaze wasn't soft, but it wasn't a weapon either. Not yet. "Are you here to capture me?" she asked. "No." A pause. "Then what are you doing?" Ronan didn't know how to answer that. The mission said Extraction Recon 0 sentiment, but the moment he saw her, something shifted. The resonance pulsing through this ruined garden had led him here, drawn him toward her like magnetic threads through shattered glass. He removed his helmet. Let her see his face. Human, sweaty, tired, but not monstrous. "Making the worst decision of my career," he said. "Saving you." The look she gave him was impossible to read. Like watching twin stars orbit a singularity and trying to name the pattern. It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't trust, but it wasn't fear anymore either. She tried to stand and failed, a soft curse, slipping in a language that danced like bells. He caught her under the arm, felt the strength buried in her fragile posture. She smelled like copper-burned silk, and something floral clinging to her skin despite the wreckage. When she stumbled, he caught her entirely. She stiffened, then froze, chest rising against his armor plate, breath shallow and uneven. For a long moment, neither moved. She had expected degradation, submission. Yet here she was, being held gently, with the kind of touch reserved for sacred relics or broken stars. "Put me down," she murmured, but there was no force behind it. "No." His arms didn't tremble as he lifted her. She was light, too light for a royal. Her people had kept her as a symbol, not a soldier. The scars she bore were political, not battlefield won. "You don't even know me," she said as he began walking toward the evac path. "I don't need to," he replied. "I just know I'm not leaving you here." Above them, a structural beam groaned. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance, sensors clicked, search drones, still hunting for heat signatures. He tightened his hold on her and moved faster. "Protocol dictates." "I shoot you," she whispered almost absently. "You're the enemy." I must be terrible at it, he muttered. That drew the faintest curl of her lips. They slipped through a service corridor blackened by smoke, and for the first time she rested her head against his shoulder. Her hair smelled like ash and crushed lavender. This doesn't mean I trust you, she said. I'd be worried if you did. A breath that might have been a laugh if not for the pain. They reached the fractured edge of a courtyard where moonlight bled across fractured mosaics. She clutched a piece of crystal to her chest, some kind of heirloom, refusing to let it go. He didn't ask. Some things weren't for questioning. What's your name? She asked suddenly. Ronan. Kaelyn! He nodded. For now that was enough. The outer ring of the city lay in ruins, its once symmetrical towers toppled like broken teeth, their alloyed frames bent inward from concussive shockwaves. Ronan moved carefully, boots avoiding loose debris, the weight of Kaelyn pressed against his back. She'd insisted on walking at first pride, refusing to let her rely on the human, but after her third fall she had gritted her teeth and accepted the fireman's carry. Her fingers curled over his shoulder plate knuckles, pale against the matte black armor. The warmth of her breath touched his neck every few steps, followed by the occasional involuntary shudder from blood loss or fever. And yet she never complained. Not once. You really are going against orders, she muttered, finally half lucid from fatigue. They'll court-martial you for this. I've had worse. Ronan grunted, eyes scanning the broken rooftops ahead for movement. Once got suspended for hacking a vending module to drop extra rations during blockade duty. Criminal, she rasped. You have no idea. She shifted slightly, her cheek pressing against the crook of his neck. He tried not to think about the intimacy of it, the alien girl bleeding through royal robes on his back, murmuring sarcasm like it was second nature. They slipped into a collapsed atrium. The glass roof blown out, its floor littered with cracked grav tiles and bits of holo displays still flickering in erratic patterns. He set her down beside the shattered base of a fountain. She winced as her legs folded beneath her. He offered a protein bar. She eyed it suspiciously. It's not poison, he said. Probably. She raised one brow. Do your women enjoy being fed synthetic algae? Only on birthdays. She took a tentative bite and promptly gagged. Stars above, she whispered. You actually consume this. Yeah. Builds character. Kaelyn chewed slowly, face twisted in theatrical misery. It tastes like plast foam and sorrow. You're not wrong. He chuckled, then immediately regretted it. His laugh echoed too loudly in the atrium. Somewhere distant metallic clanging replied. She noticed his change in posture. Her own shoulders straightened as her senses sharpened. Search drones, she asked. Maybe worse, he said, crouching by the edge of the fountain. Some of the cradle's bio-sentinels still roam. They harvest anything warm and moving. Her hand brushed the crystal she wore on a chain around her neck. Then we'd better move. She tried to stand, faltered again. Ronan caught her elbow. This time she didn't resist. Why, she asked quietly, eyes fixed on him. Why help me? You're not even supposed to be here. You're soldiers. They kill us. He considered the question as he slung her arm over his shoulders. Not all soldiers follow orders. Some follow their conscience. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. She didn't speak for several steps. As they picked their way through the derelict marketplace, the silence thickened. Not uncomfortable, just dense with questions neither had the strength to ask. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of burning coolant and acidic rain. Ahead, a security arch flickered weakly, its sensors blinking red then green. He led her under the arch, and the hum of old circuitry briefly pulsed through their bodies. Kaelyn shivered. Your kind lives in iron boxes, she whispered. Steel cities, fire ships, plasma bolts. Ours lived in resonance, in places that breathed with the planet. I live where I'm told to live, Ronan said. Doesn't mean I like it. She glanced at him. You're different from the others. He didn't respond. At the edge of the quarter, they found a collapsed temple dome, a Terran sanctuary that had once echoed with harmonic rites. Its crystalline walls now jutted like broken ribs from the earth, but the substructure below still pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Ronan pried open the access hatch and helped her inside. The air was warm, wet, almost sweet. Vines of golden fiber still glowed faintly along the curved walls. Whatever this place had been, it hadn't died yet. They collapsed onto a shallow platform wrapped in moss-like material. For a moment, neither spoke. Kaelyn's breathing slowed, her eyes fluttered shut. Do you want me to stay awake? She asked groggily. To keep watch? You've earned a nap. Wake me if they come. I will. She fell asleep with one hand curled into his armor. Hours passed like fragments of dreams, shifting colors, residual warmth. The sensation of time paused between footfalls. When Kaelyn stirred again, the room was quiet, dimly lit by fungal glass and photosynthetic filaments. She turned her head to find Ronan sitting on a sloped bench beside her plasma rifle across his lap, helmet discarded. He had removed one glove and was tracing shapes onto the wall's faded etchings. Perhaps Therrene prayers, perhaps idle loops of thought. "You stayed," she murmured. He turned. His eyes were darker in this light, reflective, like warm obsidian. "Of course I stayed." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. Not without an ulterior motive. Not without duty attached. "I dreamed of music," she whispered. "Voices in my blood." He nodded slowly. "This place hums. It's not dead, just waiting." She reached out a trembling hand. He took it without hesitation. The contact shocked her. Not physically, but in how right it felt. No royal ceremony had ever made her feel this still. They sat like that for a long time. His thumb brushed hers gently, like tuning a string. Her body remembered pain, but her heart began to remember trust. The lower chamber pulsed like a heartbeat beneath their feet. After hours of resting in the sanctuary's mossy vestibule, Kaelyn and Ronan ventured deeper into the ruins through archways choked with hanging vines of crystal fibers and beneath domes that still whispered with forgotten songs. Each step echoed with a kind of resonance, as though the ancient walls acknowledged their presence. Kaelyn's strength was returning, but unevenly. She leaned on the walls as she moved her fingertips, brushing memory-imbued stone that responded with subtle warmth. Ronan stayed close, scanning each intersection with his rifle even as the ancient silence cradled them. At the chamber's heart they found it. A hemispherical pod of transparent mineral floated in a pool of liquid light suspended by unseen force. The structure glowed in soft rhythm like lungs inhaling centuries of breath. Its surface was etched with symbols older than either of their cultures. Kaelyn paused, breath-catching. "This is a seed of Tharis," she whispered. "A place of restoration, of joining." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "Joining. It was used when our kind faced extinction. Two lifelines would enter. One would emerge strengthened, sometimes changed." He stepped closer, eyes studying the suspended capsule. "Looks like a healing chamber crossed with a womb." Sometimes, she said softly, it was both. The chamber hummed as they approached, as if awakening from a dream. The symbols along its edge pulsed brighter, scanning them. A new tone emerged higher, harmonized and urgent. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in sensation. A need, a request, a requirement. Ronan stepped back slightly. "What is it asking for?" "Consent," Kaelyn replied, voice tight. "It can't proceed unless both subjects agree. It links minds' bodies, binds threads of being, for healing. For synthesis." His brow furrowed. "Sounds invasive." "It is," she admitted. "But it could save us. I can feel it scanning the fractures in my tissues. The damage from the fall. My blood's too thin. I won't make it back across the ruins." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Then we use it." Kaelyn turned sharply. "It's not that simple. If we enter together, it won't just heal. It will connect. Merge. You and I will never be separate again. Not entirely." The implications landed heavily. Ronan looked at the pod again, then at her. "I don't care," he said. "I'm not losing you in the middle of this God's forsaken war." She took a step closer, uncertainty flickering in her eyes like candlelight. "You might not like what you see inside me. My memories, my fears, the weight of my bloodline. You've already seen mine," he said quietly. "The moment I carried you through fire." Kaelyn swallowed. Then without another word, she reached out and touched the pod. The surface rippled. A low chime sounded. The pod split open with fluid grace, revealing two mirrored hollows molded to their forms. Ronan hesitated only long enough to remove his armor chestplate and utility gear. Kaelyn slipped out of her torn ceremonial robe. The air between them thickened, not with shame, but anticipation. The intimacy wasn't erotic. It was raw. Sacred. They stepped in. The pod sealed. At first there was darkness, then warmth, then the rush of everything. Ronan's breath caught as 1,000 images flickered across his inner vision. Kaelyn as a child standing in front of a massive singing crystal. Her tutor slapping her for asking a forbidden question. The night she watched her mother's funeral flames dance across the violet sea. Shame, hope, fury. And she saw him. The backwater colony he grew up on. His brother coughing blood in a bunker hospital. The rejection letter from the flight academy. The moment he picked up a rifle not for patriotism but survival. Their memories tangled, twisted, merged, his calloused hands on hers, her silent screams swallowed by royal protocol, his defiance, her captivity, his heat, her frost. And then light. Their consciousness spiraled outward, meeting not in chaos but resonance. A third song emerged, built from pieces of both. Not subtraction, not compromise. Fusion. The pod pulsed. Kaelyn arched back, gasping. Ronan reached for her without thinking. Their bodies suspended in that luminous medium bound by threads of harmonics that vibrated against the very edge of perception. There was no time, no name, just us. Then pain. Her hand clutched his as the pod began to respond to something deeper, cellular rearrangement, neural rebalancing. An ancient protocol activated for survival, for preservation. A new pulse joined theirs, so faint, so small, but real. Kaelyn's eyes snapped open. Ronan, I feel it. His voice cracked with awe. His palm pressed to her abdomen where that subtle ripple originated. A spark, not metaphor, not symbol, life. They clung to each other as the pod shifted its function. It no longer sought simply to heal. It now preserved. The child, impossible by either of their culture's standards, began anchoring into the flow of resonance around them, a hybrid note of old blood and new purpose. The song that surrounded the chamber changed again. Now it sang of legacy, of rebirth. The chamber released them in silence. As the pod peeled open, mist vented in soft spirals, veiling their emergence in a shimmer of gold and blue light. Ronan stepped out first. His body strangely renewed, his muscles looser, but thrumming with latent power. Kaelyn followed, her eyes glowing faintly with silver trace lines now etched delicately along her temple and collarbone. She moved like a song given form, graceful, grounded, no longer fragile. Between them stretched something invisible but undeniable. Not just a bond of memory or sympathy. It was a live wire of awareness threading through their minds and bones. He could feel her heartbeat without touching her. She could sense his fear before he breathed it. And under her ribs, something even fainter stirred a rhythm, not quite hers, not quite his. Neither of them spoke of it. Not yet. Outside the sanctuary, dawn crept across the shattered world like a cautious guest. But peace was a mirage. Motion trembled on the outer ridge. Dust clouds swirled unnaturally, and in the far distance came the staccato rumble of treaded machines. The cradle of dissonance had returned. Ronan snapped his visor back into place, but now the HUD responded faster, the system syncing with something deeper inside him. His plasma rifle half dead before now pulsed brighter. It recognized him differently. Or perhaps it recognized her too. Kaelyn placed one hand on a fragment of the ancient sanctuary wall, humming softly under her breath. The structure responded, reacting to her voice like a forgotten lover. Vines drew back. Panels shimmered open. A hidden cache unveiled itself. Crystalline blades, harmonic emitters, a relic suit of Terran combat symbiosis flexible mesh armor designed to tune to its wearer's resonance. Kaelyn's fingers brushed its surface. The suit rose liquid and alive and wove itself around her frame. The moment it sealed against her spine, a glow spread outward, anchoring her to the chamber and by extension to Ronan. He watched her move, awe bleeding into admiration. "What do you see?" she asked, almost teasing, though her eyes flickered with stormlight. "Something that doesn't need protecting anymore," he murmured. "Something that could level armies." She tilted her head, listening. "They're close. 3 squads judging by their phase echo." Ronan blinked. "I didn't hear anything." "You did. You just don't know how to listen yet." They stepped into the rising light together. The first strike came fast, standard cradle protocol. Plasma bolts seared the air, aimed low to disable, then high to disorient. Ronan dropped to one knee, raised his rifle, and returned fire. But this time his weapon pulsed in sync with Kaelyn's heartbeat. Every shot curved with precision, bending just slightly around cover, as if guided by intention. She moved beside him, blade gleaming with sonic edge. One gesture, one sweep, and a trooper's armor crumpled inward with a harmonic screech. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He felt her tension as she spun behind him, knew when to duck, when to shield her back. She sensed his urgency before he even raised the rifle's overcharge. When he ran low on charge cells, she tossed a fresh clip without looking, already mid-leap over a burning crawler. They were a single organism, 2 vectors of one purpose. From a ridge above, a warcaster opened a drone gate. Dozens of skittering crab-like machines spilled out, armed with resonance nullifiers, normally devastating to Terran structures. Kaelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she sang. Just a single note. The machines stopped, shivered, and then reoriented, spinning their blasters away from her, turning on their cradle masters. Ronan stared. Did you just hack their code with your voice? She breathed deep, pupils dilated. Not voice, harmony. More troops came. Elite ones this time, cloaked in obsidian armor and wielding twin-phase spears that vibrated with discordant hums. Ronan's HUD pulsed red. Kaelyn's armor tightened. He tossed her a nod. Dance, she smirked. Try to keep up. They moved. Blades met rifles, bodies twisted through flame. One moment she swept under a falling blast, and the next he was vaulting over her to land a shot through an officer's helmet. Her blade sang in his ears, the pitch translating directly to his own internal tempo. They fought like they'd done this for years, not minutes. Every step, every breath matched. Even the machines stopped to watch, until none were left standing but them. Smoke coiled lazily across the battleground, painting the fractured city in shadow and light. Kaelyn stood at the edge of a crumbled platform, eyes closed, head tilted skyward as if listening to something just out of reach. Ronan approached, sweat drying fast on his neck. You all right? She opened her eyes. They're testing us. Who? The Order. My uncle. The ones trying to twist this world into something it was never meant to be. He watched her carefully. They know we're bonded now. They'll be afraid. Good. She turned to him, something unreadable in her expression. Not of us. Of what we represent. Harmony. A bridge between bloodlines. A child that's not supposed to exist. His stomach tightened. The word wasn't theoretical anymore. He felt it still faint, still forming, but real. And through his connection to Kaelyn, he felt something else. A third rhythm. Not just a heartbeat. A presence. The child. Their child. Then let them fear us, Ronan said, his voice quieter now. We didn't choose war. But if they want to break us, they'll find out what unity really looks like. The air around them pulsed once. Far above satellites blinked into motion. The next battle was already on its way. And they would be ready. The sky fractured above them, first with streaks of gold, then with spirals of crimson flame. From orbit, cradle strike platforms began deploying synchronized resonance disruptors. Their purpose was clear: sever the song. Tear apart whatever thread now linked Kaelyn and Ronan. Isolate the anomaly before it could become contagion. Valenreach's sanctuary dome flickered in and out of phase, barely holding. The atmosphere trembled thick with static and pressure like the air before a thunderclap. Kaelyn stood at the console in the deep chamber's core, her fingers dancing across harmonic glyphs that only she could truly understand. The ancient system responded with uncertainty, as if waking from too long a sleep. They've triangulated our resonance pattern, she said quietly, the glyphs pulsing in jagged tones. They're trying to invert us, to make our connection collapse into noise. Can you stop it? Ronan asked, his hand gripping the upper rail, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Not alone. He stepped up beside her, his skin already prickling with static where her energy touched his. They didn't need a plan, not in the old-fashioned sense. The moment he placed his hand over hers, the chamber harmonized, and it sang. Above them, pulses of blue-white energy erupted into a ring, raw frequencies unleashed by their fusion. The song bent around Ronan's military tech, warping plasma cores into instruments of resonance. Kaelyn's armor melted at the seams, unfolding into a field of motes that danced between them, linking their consciousness into one dynamic flow. Then came the scream. It wasn't sound. It was Inversion, the Order's anti-song deployed in full. Across the horizon, hundreds of cradle cultists knelt in ritual formation, channeling their corrupted frequencies toward a single point. The royal palace now turned into a ceremonial weapon hub. At its heart, Lord Dareth Kael stood robed in discordant armor, each plate emitting a note that fractured harmony itself. Around him, hovering amplification rings turned his voice into devastation, and he began to speak. Kaelyn staggered as the inversion hit her bloodstream. Her knees buckled. Ronan caught her before she felt pain echoing across their link. He's singing through me, she gasped. Through our blood. Ronan grit his teeth. Then we sing back. They climbed the sanctuary spire, Kaelyn's palm pressed to the rail to guide the harmonic lift. Light poured upward, reshaping stone into conductive resonance plates. At the apex where the structure met the broken sky, they stood together on a platform, carved in spirals like a galaxy compressed into architecture. Kaelyn reached for him. Ronan took her hand. The song returned, but this time not just between them, through them. Their voices didn't rise in music. They didn't chant or shout. They felt the grief of her childhood, the years under a silent crown, the rage of his forgotten wars, fighting for people who never knew his name, the love they had built in days that felt like lifetimes. The child nestled between them, its song still uncertain but growing bolder. The resonance flowed out. Every frequency Lord Dareth sent was answered, twisted, reshaped, harmonized. Where his notes tried to sever, theirs mended. Where his scream tore, theirs rewove. And in the space between those two opposing forces, something impossible happened. The ancient technology of the sanctuary awakened fully. It projected not just sound, but memory. Visions shimmered across the city of Kaelyn's mother defending the song with her last breath, of Eris Valen Ronan's grandfather forging pacts in the shadow of supernovas. The Order's soldiers faltered. Some dropped to their knees, ears bleeding from the contradictions in the air. Others wept. Then through the broken haze came a third signal. It did not come from Kaelyn, or from Ronan. It came from the child. A pulse so pure, so achingly right that even the corrupted harmonics recoiled. It spread like a whisper through metal and flesh. Even the orbital disruptors hesitated in their mechanical descent. Kaelyn's hand flew to her belly, her eyes widened. "She's amplifying us," she whispered. She's protecting us. Kaelyn smiled faintly. "I can feel her now." Ronan closed his eyes. "So can I." The light around them bent inward. A spiral of golden frequencies lifted from the sanctuary and slammed into the sky. The anti-song fractured. Platforms detonated in distant bursts of blue. Lord Dareth staggered as the very cathedral he stood in cracked underfoot. Still, he tried to sing. But Kaelyn's final harmony wasn't a battle cry. It was forgiveness. A wave of resonance swept across the battlefield, not to destroy, but to undo. The cultists, who had been twisted by decades of corruption, fell silent. Their eyes cleared. Their bodies slumped with exhaustion as the strings that had bound them disintegrated. The war machines powered down, no longer fed by the artificial inversions. Lord Dareth fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Kaelyn's voice echoed in his mind, "I don't hate you, but I won't let you hurt anyone else." And just like that, the silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It was peace. In the stillness, Kaelyn and Ronan stood holding each other beneath a sky now trembling with the possibility of change. They had not just ended a war. They had rewritten what it meant to be enemies. 6 months later, Valenreach was no longer a sanctuary hidden from the galaxy. It had become its center. Where once broken stone and scorched trees had framed the estate, now a sprawling convocation of species gathered under an engineered canopy of harmonized bio-silk. Delegates from 33 worlds had arrived to witness the ratification of the Harmonic Accords, an agreement that would establish resonance as a protected force, a sacred current, not a weapon. And at the heart of it all stood Kaelyn Tharis, no longer a fleeing princess, but something entirely new. Her hand rested on her rounded belly. The silver traceries across her skin now deepened with soft iridescence. The child she carried, part human, part Terran, wholly unprecedented, stirred gently within her. Each movement sent faint pulses through the air, as though the unborn girl was already in conversation with the frequencies around her. Ronan stood at her side, hand entwined with hers, the soft blue cuffs of his diplomatic uniform hiding faint scars that still ached when the weather changed. His posture remained military, but his gaze betrayed none of the old tension. Not anymore. Not since the inversion was broken. Not since the war had been replaced by something dangerously hopeful. Isolde Valen moved through the crowd with a tray of floating crystalware offering refreshments to beings whose biology she barely understood. Lyra, Ronan's sister, directed a group of curious Vorthan scientists toward the resonance well, rattling off scientific jargon laced with dry wit. Eris Valen sat at the head of the garden's central table, speaking in layered chords with an envoy of Centauri harmonics beings who communicated through bioluminescent patterns across their translucent skin. And Kaelyn, she just breathed. For the first time in her life, breathing didn't come with the weight of expectation. Around the table, ambassadors argued over ethical resonance limits and trade protocols. The details were maddening. The kind of thing she would have once delegated to distant stewards. But now she listened. Because this world was hers too, and not by birthright, but by choice. A new world. A child stirred again, and Kaelyn paused, hand tightening against her womb. "Is she awake?" Ronan asked gently. "She's more than awake," Kaelyn whispered. "She's communicating." His brow lifted. "With you. With everything." Around them, tiny changes began to manifest. Lights along the table brightened in perfect cadence. Data crystals began to glow softly in specific tones. The song of the estate, once buried beneath layers of architecture and memory, now rose to the surface. Delegates paused mid-sentence. Conversations stalled. Even the wind shifted, And then, just for an instant, the entire structure hummed in harmony. Not loud, not overwhelming, but undeniable. The song of the flow now carried through the heartbeat of a child not yet born. Kaelyn pressed both hands over her belly and laughed a sound like bells stirring starlight. "She's not waiting for permission," she said. "She's already joining the conversation." Eris stood slowly, his old joints creaking. His voice cut through the startled silence. "The child speaks," he said. "Even before speech, even before breath. And we would do well to listen." No one disagreed. The conversation resumed, but with quieter tones. With reverence. With curiosity rather than conquest. Later that night, as the twin moons rose above Valenreach and gentle resonance lamps bloomed across the sanctuary's upper spires, Kaelyn and Ronan sat together beneath the flowering branch of a tree that hadn't existed 6 months ago. The tree sang quietly. "A lullaby, perhaps. She'll have a future," Kaelyn said. "Not a throne, not a battlefield, just a chance." Ronan nodded, his arm around her shoulders, fingers absently tracing the curve of her hip. "She's already rewriting the universe." They sat in silence, letting the song settle around them. And for once, neither of them needed to speak. Because between them, something greater than words already existed. And so ends the tale of Kaelyn Tharis and Ronan Valen, the story of a runaway princess, a defiant soldier, and the child who would one day connect galaxies not through war, but through resonance. In a world that once believed difference meant division, they showed that unity, true unity, starts with choice, compassion, and a shared song. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply brought you peace in a chaotic day, we invite you to join us for more. Subscribe to the channel, share this tale with others who love deep sci-fi, and leave a comment. What would you do if your heartbeat could shape the future? Until the next story, stay resonant.